She cursed in a language older than the cobblestones beneath her feet, never expecting the man in the corner booth to understand, or worse, to remember the last time he'd heard those words, 3 centuries ago from a woman whose blood still stained his conscience. Hello everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you back. It means so much to share this space with you. If you're new here, jump right in. We're on a thrilling journey together, and you are officially part of our story from this moment forward. Whether you're a regular or just tuning in, grab your favorite snacks, settle in, and let's make some amazing memories. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love getting to know each of you. And stay tuned because tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The thing about working in a restaurant that catered to New York's supernatural elite was that nobody told you it catered to New York's supernatural elite. Katya Morozova had been serving overpriced French cuisine to the criminally wealthy for 3 months before she noticed the first crack in reality. A patron who cast no reflection in the polished silver. Another who ordered her steak so rare the center still contracted when cut. The couple in the corner who never aged between visits, though they'd been coming every Thursday for 40 years, according to Antoine, the ancient maitre d', who looked like he'd personally witnessed the fall of Rome, and probably had. But Katya had student loans that laughed in 6 languages and a linguistics degree that translated beautifully into unemployment. So she smiled, poured wine that cost more than her monthly rent, and pretended not to notice when reality occasionally forgot its own rules. Tonight, reality was being particularly forgetful. Table 7 had sent back their boeuf bourguignon 3 times. The woman, Mrs. Pemberton, old money that had gone sour somewhere around the McKinley administration, wore enough diamonds to fund a small nation's healthcare system, and the expression of someone who'd discovered philanthropy was tax-deductible but basic human decency was not. "This is overcooked," she'd announced, her accent dripping with the kind of East Coast privilege that came with summer homes and casual cruelty. "Are your kitchen staff even properly trained, or did you just import them off some boat?" Her companion, a man whose jowls suggested a long-time commitment to excess and whose laugh sounded like meat-slapping tile, had found this hilarious. Katya had smiled. The smile that didn't reach her eyes. The smile that said, "I speak 6 languages and none of them have words for how much I'd like to explain thermodynamics to you with a baseball bat." "I'll have the chef prepare another, Mrs. Pemberton," she'd said, her accent carefully neutral. Years of linguistic training had taught her to sand off the Moscow edges, to sound like she came from nowhere and everywhere. Generic. Unthreatening. Employable. "See that you do. Perhaps your girl here doesn't understand proper cuisine," Mrs. Pemberton had said to her companion, not quite under her breath. "Your girl." As if Katya were a house pet who'd failed to perform a trick. Katya had nodded. Collected the plate. The perfectly cooked, expertly seasoned, absolutely nothing wrong with it plate. And retreated to the kitchen with her dignity leaking out like blood from a gut wound. The kitchen was its own circle of hell. All stainless steel and shouting and heat that made her uniform stick to her skin. Chef Michel, who was definitely not Michel and definitely not French, but who played the part with the commitment of someone in witness protection, barely glanced at the returned plate. Again. His accent slipped. "Brooklyn, not Bordeaux. She says it's overcooked. It's perfect. I could serve that to God and he'd ask for the recipe." "Well, God isn't paying tonight. Mrs. Pemberton is." Chef Michel muttered something that was definitely not French, possibly Aramaic, and snatched the plate. "Rich people. They've forgotten what hunger tastes like. What need tastes like." Katya leaned against the wall between the walk-in freezer and the prep station just for a moment. Just long enough to remember that she had a linguistics degree from Moscow State University. That she'd written her thesis on the evolution of Slavic curse words through political oppression. That she'd come to America because the brochure had promised something better than this. The brochure had lied. "Toby tv rot nogiv stavali I piyazikum estalai," she muttered under her breath. The curse tasted like home. Like her grandmother's kitchen, all black bread and contempt for authority. Like Moscow winter and the particular fury of women who'd survived Stalin's purges and Khrushchev's incompetence and the entire 20th century's commitment to making life as difficult as possible. May someone stick legs in your mouth and drive around on your tongues. Russian cursing was an art form. Broke. Violent. Wonderfully specific. It was poetry for the perpetually aggrieved, and Katya was very, very aggrieved. She hadn't meant for anyone to hear it. but she'd forgotten about table 12. The corner booth. The one usually reserved for the restaurant's owner, whom she'd never met but whom the staff discussed in hushed tones typically reserved for natural disasters or vengeful deities. The booth that somehow existed in deeper shadow than physics should allow, where the candlelight bent around darkness instead of through it. Table 12 had arrived without a reservation, which should have been impossible. Antoine had personally seated him, moving with the kind of deference usually reserved for foreign dignitaries or credible bomb threats. And the man? Katia had noticed him immediately, the way you notice a wolf in a petting zoo. 30-something in appearance, though his eyes did arithmetic that didn't add up. Dark hair styled with the kind of casual precision that required either exceptional genetics or exceptional money, possibly both. A suit that cost more than her yearly salary, tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean frame that suggested violence could be delivered with efficiency and style. But it was the tattoos that caught her attention. They crept up his neck like vines reclaiming civilization. Not the tribal nonsense of midlife crises or the flash art of drunken decisions. These were intricate, deliberate symbols that seemed to shift in the candlelight. Old Testament angels with too many eyes, alchemical warnings in languages that predated languages, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. He'd been nursing the same glass of wine for an hour. Watching. Not reading his phone, not fidgeting, not displaying any of the normal tells of human impatience. Because, as Katia was about to discover, human was doing some heavy lifting in that description. When she'd muttered her curse, his head had turned with the precision of a predator hearing a branch snap. His attention landed on her like a spotlight, and suddenly the kitchen's oppressive heat evaporated. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. Like someone had opened a door to January. He raised one hand. A simple gesture. Beckoning. Katia's heart performed a drum solo against her ribs. Antoine appeared at her elbow like a ghost. Table 12 wants you. What? He asked for you specifically. Antoine's voice was strange. Careful. By name. I never told him my. Go. No. And whatever you do, Antoine grabbed her arm, his fingers ice cold. Be respectful. Katia crossed the restaurant floor on legs that had forgotten how to properly function. The jazz seemed muted now. The conversations around her distant, as if someone had wrapped the world in cotton. Table 12 waited. Close he was worse. Beautiful in the way poisonous things were beautiful. Angular features that suggested Eastern European ancestry, maybe, or Middle Eastern or something older than modern borders. Skin that was pale but not unhealthy. More like he'd simply opted out of the sun's jurisdiction entirely. And those eyes. Dark but with flecks of gold that caught light like coins at the bottom of a well. He smiled as she approached. The kind of smile that should come with a warning label. You called for me? Katia's voice came out steadier than she'd expected. I did. His accent was strange. Not Russian but with the phonetic memory of it, like someone who'd learned the language before the Bolshevik Revolution and hadn't bothered updating their pronunciation. His voice was silk-laced with steel. Honey poured over a knife blade. You have an interesting vocabulary. Katia's stomach dropped into her shoes. I apologize if I... Say it again. He leaned forward. Close enough that she could smell him. Old books and older earth, libraries and graveyards. The scent of something that had been alive so long it had started to smell like history. The curse. Say it again. Slowly. Around them, the restaurant hummed with oblivious life. Mrs. Pemberton was terrorizing some new server. Jazz leaked from hidden speakers. Crystal caught and fractured light into 1,000 small prisms. But at table 12, time seemed negotiable. Every instinct screamed at Katia to apologize. To bow and scrape and retreat. But something else rose up. Pride. Defiance. The reckless fury of 3 months of swallowed dignity, of linguistic degrees counting for nothing, of being called your girl by people who wouldn't know culture if it bit them. She leaned closer, close enough to smell that strange ancient scent of him, close enough to see that his pupils were wrong, slightly vertical like a cat's, and repeated it. Toby tib v rot nogiv stavali I piazicum estelai. Each word carefully enunciated. Each syllable a small rebellion. His smile widened, revealing teeth that were just slightly too white, too sharp. Perfect, he murmured. I haven't heard that particular curse in 300 years. Not since a peasant girl in Kiev called down similar damnation upon a nobleman who'd burned her village. The restaurant tilted. Or maybe Katya did. What happened to her? She whispered. His eyes gleamed like gold coins in dark water. I hired her. One should always employ people who understand the proper application of creative violence. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Who are you? Katya breathed. He extended his hand. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, from a time when handshakes sealed contracts written in blood. Dmitry Volkov, owner of this establishment. And you, Katya Morozova, are either very brave or very stupid. Those aren't mutually exclusive, she heard herself say. He laughed. It was a beautiful sound. Terrible and beautiful, like church bells at a funeral. No, he agreed. They rarely are. Katya's grandmother had always said that trouble arrived in expensive suits and good manners. Standing in front of Dmitry Volkov, vampire, restaurateur, and apparently her boss, Katya understood that Babushka had been understating the case considerably. Sit, Dmitry said, gesturing to the seat across from him. It wasn't a request. But it also wasn't quite a command. Something in between. An invitation that came with consequences for declining. Katya sat. The leather booth was buttersoft and probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. The wine in his glass was so dark it looked like liquid night. He hadn't touched it in over an hour, she'd noticed. Just swirled it occasionally, watching the legs slide down the crystal like he was reading prophecies in fermentation. You're remarkably calm, he observed. Most people have more dramatic reactions to discovering vampires are real. Most people haven't spent 3 months working here. Katya folded her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. I noticed things. The reflections that didn't match. The patron who ordered coffee but never drank it, just inhaled the steam like she was mainlining memories. The couple who've been coming here for 40 years but look 30. Observant. I have a linguistics degree in 6 languages. Observation is literally my job description. Was my job description. Before it became serving overpriced beef to the undead bourgeoisie. His laugh was surprised. Genuine. The undead bourgeoisie. I like that. Though technically several of our patrons are working class. Immortality is surprisingly egalitarian. Death doesn't care about your tax bracket. Just your blood type? Among other things. He finally took a sip of his wine. His throat moved as he swallowed, and Katya found herself staring at the tattoos on his neck. They really did seem to shift. Angel wings folding and unfolding. Symbols rotating through configurations that hurt her brain. You're not screaming. Not running. Not praying. Why? Katya considered lying. Considered playing it safe. Then remembered she'd just cursed in Old Church Slavonic at a vampire king and Safe had left the building approximately 300 years ago. Because I'm tired, she said simply. Tired of pretending. Tired of smiling at people who treat me like furniture. Tired of being overqualified and underemployed. Tired of the American dream turning out to be a very specific kind of nightmare that comes with student loans and no health care. Tired enough to work for a vampire? You said you hired the last woman who cursed at you. I'm assuming the benefits are better than what I'm currently getting. He studied her. Really studied her. Not the way men usually looked at women. That invasive inventory of parts and possibilities. This was different. Older. Like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood, deciding if it was worth finishing. The woman in Kiev, he said slowly, became one of my most trusted advisors. She served for 70 years before she chose to die. I offered to turn her. She declined. Said she'd seen enough of eternity to know it wasn't for her. Wise woman. The wisest. She told me once that immortality was wasted on immortals. That we forget the value of time because we have too much of it. He set down his wine glass with precise care. She also told me that I was an aristocratic prick who needed someone unafraid to tell him the truth. She sounds delightful. She was terrifying. I miss her daily. Something flickered across his face. Not quite grief. Something older. More complicated. When I heard you curse tonight, that specific curse, in that specific dialect, I thought for a moment she'd come back. That death had proven negotiable after all. The restaurant's jazz had shifted. Something slow and mournful. A saxophone that sounded like loneliness given breath. I'm not her, Katya said quietly. No. But you have her fire. That refusal to bow. That linguistic precision. He leaned forward. Tell me, Katya Morozova, what would you do if you could stop carrying trays? If your languages actually mattered? If your education counted for something other than disappointment? It was a test. Obviously a test. The kind where the wrong answer got you killed or worse. But Katya was so tired of wrong answers meaning unemployment instead of death. At least death was honest. I'd translate, she said. Really translate. Not just words but context. The things lost between languages. Russian has 17 words for different types of snow. Arabic has dozens for love. English has 20 ways to say, synergize. And none of them mean anything. She met his eyes. I'd build bridges. Real ones. Between people who've forgotten how to talk to each other. Dmitri's smile was slow. Dangerous. Delighted. What if I told you I need exactly that? A translator who understands that communication is warfare by other means. Someone who can negotiate between species that barely share a reality, let alone a language. I'd ask what the catch is. Smart girl. The catch is that you'd be working for the supernatural community. Vampires, werewolves, witches. Every creature that goes bump in the night and occasionally needs to bump in an organized, legally binding way. You'd be translating treaties written in blood. Mediating disputes that could end in apocalypse. Attending meetings where everyone's armed and immortal and very, very petty. So basically the UN but with fangs? Essentially. Though arguably more functional. Katya laughed. It bubbled up unexpected, slightly hysterical. This is insane. Completely. He pulled a card from his jacket. Heavy stock. Embossed. The kind of business card that cost more per square inch than her apartment. But the pay is excellent. The benefits include healthcare. Actual healthcare, not the American delusion thereof. Though. Vision. Protection from things that typically eat people who know too much. She took the card. It was warm. Like it had been living in his pocket for centuries, absorbing body heat he shouldn't technically have. Dmitry Volkov. King of the Eastern Seaboard. Proprietor Nokny Dvorets. Below that a phone number. An email address. And a symbol she didn't recognize but that made her eyes water when she looked at it directly. King, she said. It's a working title. Very organizational. Mostly meaningless. Occasionally requires declarations of war but that's rare. Quarterly at most. You're joking. I never joke about paperwork. The bureaucracy of immortality is staggering. He stood, moving with that inhuman grace that shouldn't be possible in a body that had bones and joints. Think about it. Take the weekend. If you're interested, call that number Monday. If not, you'll find your final paycheck includes a very generous severance and a non-disclosure agreement that's legally binding in both human and supernatural courts. And if I talk anyway? His smile was knife-sharp. Then we'd have a problem. And I've been solving problems for a very, very long time. It should have sounded like a threat. Did sound like a threat. But there was something almost weary in his voice. Like threatening people was just another item on an endless to-do list. One question, Katya said, still sitting, still holding his card like it might burn her. Why me? You could have anyone. Someone with experience in, she gestured vaguely, supernatural diplomacy or whatever. Dmitry paused at the edge of the booth. The candlelight caught his profile. He could have been carved from marble. A statue of something that had forgotten how to be human but remembered the aesthetics. Because, he said, you cursed at me in a dead language and meant every word. Because you see things and don't run. Because you're tired of pretending to be less than you are. He looked back at her. And because 300 years ago I let the best advisor I ever had die mortal because I was too proud to admit I needed her. I don't make that mistake twice. Then he was gone. Not walking away. Just gone. Between one breath and the next, the booth was empty except for his wine glass and the fading scent of old books. Katya sat there for a long moment holding a business card that was probably worth more than her life. From across the restaurant Mrs. Pemberton's voice carried. Girl, where's my wine? Katya looked at the card. Looked at Mrs. Pemberton. Looked at the next however many years of her life stretching out in an endless parade of smiles and trays and swallowed dignity. Fuck it, she muttered in Russian. She stood. Walked to Mrs. Pemberton's table. and said in perfect crystal-clear English with just enough Moscow to make it interesting, "Madam, I quit. Effective immediately. Your wine will be delivered by someone who gives a damn." "I demonstrably do not." Mrs. Pemberton's face went through several interesting colors. Purple. Red. A sort of mottled eggplant that suggested her blood pressure was attempting a prison break. "I'll have you blacklisted from every establishment in the city." "Good luck with that," Katya said cheerfully. "I just got a better offer." She walked out of Nokny Dvorets with nothing but her purse and Dmitry Volkov's card and the kind of reckless joy that comes from burning bridges behind you without checking if you can swim. Katya's studio apartment looked even smaller after meeting a vampire king. She'd spent Saturday pacing. 17 steps from the Murphy bed to the kitchenette. 11 steps from the bathroom to the single window that overlooked an alley where pigeons had formed what appeared to be a criminal syndicate. The apartment was 400 square feet of overpriced real estate that smelled like the previous tenant's poor life choices and her own instant ramen desperation. The business card sat on her counter. Still warm. Still making her eyes water when she looked at the symbol too long. She'd done research. Hours of it. Falling down internet rabbit holes that started with Dmitry Volkov, New York, and ended with conspiracy theories, archived newspaper articles from the 1800s, and a Reddit thread titled, "My boss is literally a vampire and I don't mean metaphorically." Most of it was nonsense. But some of it. There were photographs. Daguerreotypes from the 1850s showing a man who looked remarkably like Dmitry at a society function. A painting from 1780 in a Ukrainian museum catalogue. Aristocrat, unnamed, with the same angular features and that particular way of standing that suggested violence was always an option. References in translated Tsarist documents to a Volkov, who'd served as an intermediary during peasant uprisings. Either Dmitry was immortal or his family had incredible genes and a commitment to recycling the same face. Katya suspected immortal. Sunday she'd called her mother. A mistake in retrospect. "You quit." Her mother's voice crackled across the Atlantic, sharp with the particular disappointment Russian mothers wielded like a weapon. "Without another job? Katya Sergeyevna, this is not how we raised you." "Mama, the job was terrible. The people were worse." "All jobs are terrible. All people are worse. This is capitalism, not a fairy tale." "I have another opportunity." "Opportunity." Her mother made it sound like a curse. "Your father and I sacrificed everything for you to have education. To have future. And you throw it away for opportunity?" Guilt was hereditary in Russian families. Passed down like recipes in trauma. "It's a translation position," Katya said, which was technically true. "High level. International. International." Her mother's suspicion was audible. "What kind of international?" "The kind that pays well and uses my degree. If it sounds too good to be true, it's either a scam or a vampire." "I know, Mama." Her mother had laughed. If only she knew. By Monday morning, Katya had made her decision. Which was really just admitting she'd made it the moment Dmitry Volkov had smiled at her like she was interesting instead of invisible. She called the number on the card. It rang once. A woman answered. Voice smooth as silver, accent carefully neutral. "Volkov Enterprises. How may I direct your call?" "This is Katya Morozova. I'm calling about a translation position." "Miss Morozova." "Yes. We've been expecting you." Pause. The sound of clicking keyboards. Talons. "Mr. Volkov has cleared his schedule for 11 o'clock. A car will collect you at 10:30. The address you're currently at is." She rattled off Katya's address with casual precision. "Correct." "How did you?" "Mr. Volkov is very thorough. Wear something professional but comfortable. You'll be meeting several individuals today and first impressions matter. Especially when those individuals can smell fear." The line went dead. Katya stared at her phone. Then at her closet. Then at the clock that said 8:47 a.m. and counting. "Comfortable but professional for meeting people who can smell fear," she muttered. "Sure. Normal Monday. Completely normal Monday." She settled on black slacks, a white blouse, and a blazer her roommate from Moscow State had left behind 3 years ago. It was slightly too large, which made her look like she was playing dress-up in adult clothes, but it was the best she had. At exactly 10:30 her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Car outside." Katya looked out her window. A black Mercedes idled at the curb. Not the stretch limo absurdity of movies, but sleek and expensive in a way that made her neighbors' vehicles look like they'd been assembled from spare parts and prayers. The driver was a woman. Tall, dark-skinned, with silver hair cropped close and the kind of posture that suggested military training or extreme yoga. She opened the rear door as Katya approached. "Ms. Morozova? That's me. I'm Nadia. I'll be driving you to the office. It's about 20 minutes depending on traffic and whether we encounter any territorial disputes." Territorial disputes? Nadia's smile was all teeth. Very white teeth. Very sharp teeth. Werewolves. They're very particular about boundaries. Especially Mondays. Something about the full moon cycle makes them cranky about commutes. She said it so casually. Like discussing traffic patterns. Katya got in the car before her brain could fully process that sentence. The interior was leather and new car smell and something else. Something wild. Like forest floor and lightning. Nadia drove with aggressive precision, cutting through Manhattan traffic like it was a personal insult to her driving abilities. "First time?" Nadia asked, eyes on the road. "First time what?" "Working for supernaturals. Is it that obvious?" "You're breathing like you're expecting me to eat you." "Relax. I only eat people on Thursdays and even then only the ones who deserve it." She glanced in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were amber. Literally amber, like honey backlit by sunshine. That was a joke. Mostly. I'm a vegetarian. Ethically complicated given my nature, but we all make compromises. Nadia took a corner that probably violated several laws of physics. "You'll meet others today. Vampires, obviously. A few werewolves from the northeastern pack. Maybe a witch or two if Dimitri's feeling diplomatic. They're always the worst at meetings. Very long-winded. Very convinced their opinion matters more because they can turn you into a toad." "Can they actually turn you into a toad?" "Depends on the witch. Most can manage a temporary amphibian situation. The really powerful ones can do permanent transformations, but it's considered bad form. Paperwork nightmare. Try explaining that to the DMV." They pulled up to a building in Midtown. Glass and steel, the kind of corporate monolith that screamed money and power and lawyers who ate regulations for breakfast. A tasteful bronze plaque near the entrance read, "Volkov Enterprises International Consulting and Acquisitions." "We're here," Nadia announced. 32nd floor. Receptionist's name is Thomas. He's a vampire, very old, very British, very particular about pronunciation. Don't call him Tom. He once made someone's life a bureaucratic hell for 6 months over a nickname. Noted. "And Ms. Morozova?" Nadia's amber eyes met hers in the mirror. "Breathe. Dimitri doesn't hire people to watch them fail. He hired you because you cursed at him in a dead language and didn't apologize. Remember that when the imposter syndrome kicks in." The elevator to the 30th floor was mirror-polished and faster than physics should allow. Katya's stomach did complicated gymnastics. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like money had mated with good taste and produced something intimidating. The receptionist looked up. Thomas, presumably 60-ish in appearance, with the kind of British facial structure that suggested generations of careful breeding and possibly some horses somewhere in the family tree. He wore a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Katya's education. "Ms. Morozova," he said, accent pure received pronunciation. "Welcome to Volkov Enterprises. Mr. Volkov is expecting you in conference room A. 3rd door on your left. We have an excellent O negative if you're feeling adventurous." Katya's brain stuttered. "Coffee. Please." Civilized choice. He produced a cup, actual china not paper, filled with coffee that smelled like it cost more per ounce than gold. "A word of advice. The werewolf representative Jackson has strong opinions about grammar. Don't split infinitives in his presence. He once ended a negotiation over a misplaced modifier." "You're joking." Thomas's expression didn't change. "I haven't joked since 1847. It was exhausting." Conference room A was glass-walled and contained 5 people who all turned to look at her simultaneously. The predator effect was overwhelming. Dimitri stood at the head of a massive table. He wore a different suit, charcoal, perfectly tailored, making him look like he'd invented the concept of wearing clothes. Next to him, a woman with red hair and green eyes that literally glowed. Across from her, a man built like he bench-pressed trucks for cardio with facial hair that suggested wolves and bad decisions. Two others, a thin man with glasses and an expression of permanent disapproval, and a woman whose age was impossible to determine and whose jewelry looked like it came with curses. "Katya," Dmitri said, and his smile was genuinely warm. "Welcome to your interview. Try not to let them eat you. We have a strict no cannibalism policy during business hours." The werewolf, Jackson presumably, grinned. "After business hours, though?" "Jackson," the red-haired woman said sharply. "Behave." He laughed. Sounded like rocks tumbling downhill. Katya took a seat, set down her coffee, and thought, "Well, babushka, you said trouble comes in expensive suits. You never mentioned it would be this well organized." "Let's begin," Dmitri said. "Katya, meet the Supernatural Council of the Eastern Seaboard. Try not to insult anyone. And if you do," his eyes glinted, "make it memorable." The red-haired woman spoke first. Her voice had the quality of expensive violins and barely restrained homicide. "Dmitri tells us you speak 6 languages and cursed at him in Old Church Slavonic." She leaned forward, eyes literally glowing brighter. "I'm Vivian Ashford. Vampire. 312 years old. I run the financial sector of our little operation, which means I deal with money that doesn't technically exist and tax codes written by people who are technically dead. Your resume says you have a linguistics degree. What I want to know is, can you lie in 6 languages?" Katya blinked. "Excuse me. Lie. Fabricate. Creatively reinterpret truth." Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Half of supernatural diplomacy is telling people what they want to hear in ways that technically aren't false. The other half is recognizing when you're being lied to. "So, can you?" It was a test. Obviously a test. Katya met her glowing eyes and said in flawless Russian, "Your hair is the most beautiful shade I've ever seen." Then switched to French, though perhaps a bit outdated for current fashion. Spanish, but who am I to judge style? German, especially when discussing aesthetics with someone who could kill me. Mandarin, which would be unfortunate for both of us. And finally Arabic, since I suspect we could be excellent colleagues if you stopped trying to intimidate me with eye contact. Silence. Then Vivian threw back her head and laughed. It was a glorious sound. Terrible and delighted. "Oh, I like her. Dmitri, where have you been hiding this one?" "She was serving Mrs. Pemberton overcooked beef," Dmitri said dryly. "I believe the technical term is wasted potential." The werewolf, Jackson, was grinning. He was massive up close. 6'5" at least, with shoulders that suggested he'd never met a doorframe he couldn't destroy. His eyes were yellow. Not amber like Nadia's. Yellow like a wolf's, like something that hunted in moonlight. "You've got spine," he rumbled. His accent was southern. "Georgia maybe. Deep and slow like honey. Most humans walk in here smelling like fear and bad decisions. You smell like..." He inhaled deeply, which should have been creepy but somehow wasn't. Coffee and anger and something else. Something older. "Her grandmother taught her those curses," Dmitri supplied. "Old Slavic. Pre-Soviet. The kind of linguistic tradition that survived Stalin by being too profane to write down." Jackson nodded appreciatively. "My kind respects oral tradition. We've been passing down stories since before humans invented writing." "What else did your grandmother teach you?" "That men who ask too many questions usually deserve the curses," Katya said sweetly. He barked a laugh. "Oh yeah. I like her too. She's got teeth even if they're the dull human kind." The thin man with glasses cleared his throat. Sounded like paper rustling in a crypt. "If we're quite done with the hazing ritual, perhaps we could discuss Ms. Morozova's actual qualifications?" His accent was precise, academic. British like Thomas but older. "I'm Dr. Edmund Cross. Vampire. Former Oxford Don, current legal counsel for supernatural treaty negotiations. I need someone who understands not just language but legal language. The difference between shall and will in contract law. The implications of subjunctive mood in binding agreements. I wrote my thesis on linguistic precision in political propaganda," Katya said. "How small changes in grammar can completely reverse meaning. How Soviet translators would deliberately mistranslate Western documents to serve state narratives. How language is the first weapon in every war. Edmund's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his glasses. Approval maybe. Adequate. Though I'll need to test you on actual treaty documents before I'm convinced. Edmund is never convinced, the woman with the impossible age said. Her voice was smoke and silk. I'm Morgana Lee. Which? I don't share my age because time is a construct and I've stopped participating. I'll be your primary contact for magical negotiations which are, she waved her hand, jewelry jangling, linguistically unique. Spells require precise pronunciation. One wrong syllable and you're summoning demons instead of requesting pizza delivery. That happened once, Vivian muttered. Twice, Jackson corrected. The second time was in Cleveland. We don't talk about Cleveland, Dimitri said firmly. Katia looked around the table. At the vampire king who owned a restaurant. The vampire accountant with glowing eyes. The werewolf who cared about grammar. The vampire lawyer who probably made God himself nervous. The witch who'd accidentally summoned demons while ordering pizza. This was insane. This was also the most interesting job interview she'd ever had. So, she said carefully, what exactly would I be doing? Besides translating and not summoning demons. Dimitri pulled out a folder. Actual paper, not digital. The pages inside looked old. Some were in languages she recognized. Russian, French, German. Others were in scripts she'd never seen. Symbols that moved slightly when she looked at them. The supernatural community operates on treaties, he explained. Agreements between species, between territories, between individuals with enough power to end civilization if they get cranky. These treaties are written in multiple languages, often simultaneously because magic and law both require precision. Your job would be to translate, negotiate, and occasionally prevent apocalyptic misunderstandings. Occasionally. Katia repeated. Bi-monthly, Vivian said. The apocalyptic misunderstandings are very punctual. Jackson leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously. Last month we almost had a war because someone translated hunting grounds as hunting grounds instead of hunting territories. Seems the same, right? Wrong. Grounds implies open access. Territories implies ownership. The Northeast Pack almost went to war with the Montreal vampires over a preposition. A preposition, Katia repeated flatly. Welcome to supernatural politics, Edmund said dryly. Where grammar is literally a matter of life and death, and the Oxford comma has caused 3 documented conflicts in the last century. Morgana leaned forward, jewelry catching light in ways that made Katia's eyes hurt. Here's the real question, honey. Can you handle being the only human in rooms where everyone else is armed with supernatural abilities and thousand-year grudges? Can you tell a werewolf alpha he's wrong about linguistics without getting your throat torn out? Can you negotiate between vampires who remember the actual fall of Rome and still hold grudges about property disputes from 455 AD? It was the core question. The real test. Katia thought about her linguistics degree gathering dust. About serving Mrs. Pemberton and her perpetually imperfect beef. About 3 months of being invisible, of swallowing curses, of being your girl. She thought about her grandmother who'd survived Stalin and Khrushchev and the entire Soviet Union's commitment to crushing individual spirit. Who taught her that language was power, that words could be weapons, that sometimes the only rebellion available was linguistic. Yes, she said simply. I can handle it. Why? Dimitri asked. His eyes were intent. Gold flecks catching light. Why do you want this? Because she was tired. Because her degree deserved better. Because she'd cursed at a vampire king and he'd offered her a job instead of death. But what she said was, because language matters. Because the difference between war and peace can be a single word. Because someone needs to care about precision when everyone else is focused on power. She met his eyes. And because I'm really, really good at what I do and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. The room was silent. Then Dimitri smiled. That dangerous, delighted smile that suggested he'd just won a bet with fate. Vivian. She'll do. Jackson. Hell yes. She's got spine. Edmund. Pending competency testing acceptable. Morgana. The witch studied her. Really studied her. Eyes that were old and a face that could be any age. There's something else, she said slowly. Something in your blood. Old magic. Dormant but there. Slavic, I think. Protective charms woven into your family line generations ago. Kadia's blood went cold. What? Your ancestors were wise. They bound protection into your bloodline. Against compulsion, against certain magics. It's faint now, diluted through generations, but it's there. Morgana's smile was knowing. Makes you resistant to vampire influence. Useful trait in this line of work. Dimitri's expression was carefully neutral. You didn't mention that. I didn't know, Katia said honestly. My grandmother told stories, but I thought they were just stories. Folklore. Superstition. Folklore, Morgana said softly, is just history that survived by being too strange to write down officially. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was teaching you. The curses. The protection. The refusal to bow. She nodded. Yes. She'll do very well. Dimitri stood. Extended his hand across the table. Welcome to Volkov Enterprises, Katia Morzova. Your starting salary is, he named a figure that made her vision blur slightly, plus benefits, housing assistance, and a protection detail for the first 6 months while you learn to navigate our world. Protection detail? You'll be dealing with individuals who could kill you accidentally by standing too close. Better safe than sorry. He pulled out a contract. Multiple pages. Multiple languages. She recognized Russian, English, French. Others she'd need to study. Standard employment agreement. Read it carefully. Edmund, naturally, included 17 escape clauses and a provision about dental. Dental is important, Edmund said primly. Especially when working with creatures who have fangs. Katia took the contract with shaking hands. This was real. This was actually happening. One more thing, Dimitri said, and his voice was serious now. Once you sign this, you're part of our world. Permanently. You'll know things that can't be unknown. See things that can't be unseen. There's no going back to normal because normal will know you've crossed the line. He leaned forward. Are you absolutely certain? She thought about her studio apartment and instant ramen and Mrs. Pemberton and the next 40 years of invisibility. Where do I sign? She asked. Katia signed the contract in 3 languages. Russian, English, and, at Edmund's insistence, Latin, because apparently supernatural law hadn't updated since the fall of Rome and no one wanted to be the one to suggest it. Her hand cramped by the 3rd signature. Dimitri provided a pen that was definitely too expensive to be holding. Heavy. Gold. The ink flowed like liquid night. Congratulations, Vivian said when Katia finally set down the pen. You're now legally bound to secrecy, loyalty, and attendance at the annual winter solstice party, which is exactly as tedious as it sounds but with better wine. And worse small talk, Jackson added. Last year someone started a debate about the best century for literature. It lasted 4 hours. People got stabbed. Metaphorically stabbed, Edmund clarified. No actual stabbing. Gerald from the Boston Coven got mouthy about Shakespeare's authenticity. Took a letter opener to the shoulder. He recovered, Dimitri said, like this was a normal workplace hazard. Witches are resilient. Dramatic but resilient. Morgana gathered her things. A bag that seemed to contain more items than physics should allow. I'll send you a reading list, honey. Magical linguistics, spellwork, grammar, the usual. Also a protection charm. Something stronger than what's in your blood. You'll need it when dealing with the younger vampires. They get enthusiastic. Enthusiastic. Katia repeated. Hungry. I meant hungry. But enthusiasm sounds more professional. She swept out in a jangle of jewelry and perfume that smelled like thunderstorms. Jackson stood, his chair groaning in relief. You'll do good, Morzova. And if any of the pack gives you trouble, you tell me. We take care of our translators. Last one saved us from a war over a comma. We're very appreciative. What happened to the last translator? Katia asked. Retired. Married a Selkie. Living in Ireland now, very happy, sends Christmas cards. He grinned, all wolf. Supernatural retirement plan is excellent. Most of us don't die, we just get tired and move to coastal towns with good seafood. Edmund packed his briefcase with the precision of someone who'd been organizing documents since the invention of documents. Your first assignment will be translating a territorial agreement between the Manhattan vampires and the New Jersey werewolf pack. Fascinating case study in preposition usage and boundary disputes. I'll email you the preliminary documents. Expect approximately 300 pages. 300 pages about borders? About borders, hunting rights, noise complaints, and a surprisingly contentious debate about trash collection on full moon nights. The werewolves transform and forget about recycling. The vampires are very environmentally conscious. It's become philosophical. He left with a nod that might have been approval or might have been indigestion. Difficult to tell. Vivian was the last to leave. She paused at the door, red hair catching light like fire. Advice. Don't trust anyone completely. Not even Dimitri. Especially not Dimitri. Vampires are immortal, which means we've had centuries to perfect lying. We're very, very good at it. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to keep him honest. That's why he hired you. To be the voice in the room that isn't 300 years old and jaded. She smiled. Sharp and genuine. Also because I like you and I want you to survive. We go through translators quickly. Last three lasted 2 years, 18 months and 6 weeks respectively. What happened to the 6-week one? Tried to embezzle from a werewolf pack. They ate him. Very messy. Very avoidable. Don't embezzle from werewolves. They take it personally. Then she was gone and Katia was alone with Dimitri in a conference room that suddenly felt much smaller. He was watching her. Not the predatory watch from the restaurant. Something else. More curious. More human, if that word still applied to someone who'd been alive for centuries. Overwhelmed, he asked. Completely. Good. If you weren't overwhelmed, I'd worry about your judgment. He gathered the contract, handling it with the care of someone who understood that signatures mattered. You'll start tomorrow. Nadia will collect you at 8. We'll begin with the basics. Supernatural species, territorial maps, common negotiation pitfalls. The real work starts next week. And tonight. Tonight you process. You panic quietly in your apartment. You question every life choice that led here. You consider running. His smile was knowing. Then tomorrow you'll come back anyway. Because you're not someone who runs. You're someone who curses in Old Church Slavonic and means every word. He was right. Annoyingly right. Can I ask you something? Katia said. You can ask. I may not answer. The woman in Kiev. The one who cursed at you 300 years ago. What was her name? Something flickered across his face. Old pain, old memory. Oksana. Oksana Petrovna. She was a healer's daughter. 23 when I met her. 93 when she died. She spent 70 years telling me uncomfortable truths and saving me from my own worst instincts. He looked out the window at Manhattan's jagged skyline. I offered her immortality 6 times. She refused every time. Said life was precious because it ended. That I'd forgotten that. Had you? Completely. When you have infinite time you stop valuing finite things. People. Moments. The way winter smells in Kiev, or how bread tastes when you're actually hungry. He turned back to her. Oksana reminded me. For 70 years she was my conscience. My anchor. My reminder that immortality without humanity is just existing with better aesthetics. You loved her. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. It was written in the careful way he said her name in the 70-year gap he'd never filled. She taught me that the best people are the ones who tell you no, he said finally. Who push back. Who refuse to be impressed by power or age or the ability to break someone in half without trying. His eyes met hers. You remind me of her. Not physically. Not in personality. But in spirit. That refusal to bow. That linguistic precision used as a weapon. That capacity for creative violence delivered via grammar. Is that why you hired me? Because I remind you of a dead woman. I hired you because you're exceptional. Because your skills are wasted on Mrs. Pemberton's overcooked beef. Because the supernatural community needs people who give a damn about precision. He moved toward the door. If you remind me of someone I respected more than anyone in 3 centuries, that's just a bonus. And if I can't do this? If I'm not as good as you think? Then we'll find out together. But I've lived a very long time, Katia Morzova. I've learned to recognize potential. He paused at the threshold. Also, Morgana never lies about magical bloodlines. She says you have ancestral protection, you do. Which means someone in your family history knew about our world and prepared their descendants accordingly. You might want to ask your grandmother about that. My grandmother is in Moscow. Then I suggest a phone call. Long-distance rates are reasonable these days. Time zones less so. He checked his watch. Expensive, old, probably worth more than a car. Nadia will take you home. Tomorrow 8 a.m. sharp. Or something comfortable. We'll be doing a lot of walking. Manhattan has several supernatural districts humans don't see. You'll need to learn to navigate them. Districts humans don't see? Overlapping reality. Same physical space, different perceptual layer. It's complicated. Edmund will explain it with charts. Many, many charts. He loves charts almost as much as he loves proper comma usage. Then he was gone, moving with that impossible vampire speed. And Katia was alone in a conference room in a building that apparently served as headquarters for the Eastern Seaboard's supernatural community. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. She just signed a contract with a vampire. Agreed to work for creatures that shouldn't exist. Stepped into a world that overlapped with reality but existed in some other layer she couldn't quite comprehend yet. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Car ready when you are. Take your time. First day is always hardest. Nadia. Katia gathered her things. The coffee cup, actual china now empty. Her purse, which felt inadequate for someone who'd just signed away their normal life. The copy of her contract, written in 3 languages and bound with what might have been actual magic. The elevator ride down was silent. Her reflection in the mirrors looked the same. Same face. Same slightly too large blazer. Same woman who'd been serving overpriced beef to the undead bourgeoisie 3 days ago. But something was different. Something in her eyes. A spark. Purpose. The opposite of invisibility. Nadia was waiting by the Mercedes. How do you feel? Like I just joined a cult. Close. But our cult has better benefits and significantly less Kool-Aid. She opened the door. Home. Yeah. Home. Katia slid into the back seat. Nadia? The translators who didn't last. What really happened to them? One retired rich and happy. One married a supernatural and moved to Ireland. That part was true. One tried to embezzle from werewolves and learned a valuable lesson about pack loyalty. Nadia met her eyes in the mirror. And one couldn't handle knowing that everything she'd believed about reality was wrong. She took the money, signed the NDAs, and moved to Montana to pretend magic wasn't real. Did it work? For her? Maybe. She convinced herself it was all an elaborate prank. Human brains are excellent at denial. Nadia pulled into traffic. But you won't do that. How do you know? Because you cursed at a vampire king in a dead language. Because you looked at a room full of predators and negotiated salary. Because you have your grandmother's protection in your blood and her fire in your spine. He grinned. You're going to be fine, Morozova. Or you're going to die spectacularly. Either way, it'll be interesting. Comforting. I don't do comforting. I do honest. Honest is more useful when dealing with creatures that can smell lies. They drove in silence for a while. Manhattan slid past the windows. Familiar streets that would never be quite the same now. How many vampires were walking those sidewalks? How many werewolves took the subway? How many witches bought coffee at Starbucks and paid with money that technically existed? Katia wondered if she'd made the right choice, or just the only choice that felt like living instead of existing. When they reached her apartment building, Nadia handed her a phone. Expensive. Already activated. Company phone. Dimitri's number is programmed. So is mine and the rest of the council. Emergency line at the bottom. Use it if something tries to eat you. Response time is usually under 5 minutes. Usually. Manhattan traffic is unpredictable. Even for vampires. She smiled. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts your real education. Morozova. Welcome to the world behind the world. Try not to die. We just got the paperwork filed. Katia didn't sleep. She called her grandmother instead. 3 a.m. in New York meant 11 a.m. in Moscow. A reasonable hour for interrogating elderly relatives about secret magical bloodlines. Babushka answered on the second ring. Katia? Why are you calling? Did someone die? Are you pregnant? Please tell me you're not pregnant by an American. No one died. I'm not pregnant. Babushka, I need to ask you something strange. A long pause. The sound of a television being muted. Her grandmother's apartment in Moscow. Tiny, crowded with 70 years of accumulated life. Katia could picture it perfectly. The lace curtains. The icon in the corner. The photographs of relatives who'd survived famines and purges and the slow grinding machinery of Soviet bureaucracy. Strange how. Her grandmother's voice changed. Sharpened. Strange like, I'm dating someone unsuitable, or strange like, I've discovered things? Strange like a witch told me our family has protective magic in our bloodline. Strange like I've been hired to work for vampires and werewolves. Strange like everything you told me was folklore might have been instruction manual. Silence. Long enough that Katya thought the connection had dropped. Then, Bоже mой. You found them. Or they found you. Katya's heart stopped. Babushka. I hoped you wouldn't. I hoped America would be far enough, that you'd live a normal life with normal problems. But you have my mother's gift. The tongue that cuts. The words that carry weight. Her grandmother sighed. It was the sound of old secrets finally getting air. Our family has served them for generations, Katya. Since before the Tsars. Since Kiev was young. We were translators, negotiators, the voices between worlds. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted better for you. Because my mother died at 50, worn out from mediating conflicts between creatures that could end her with a thought. Because my grandmother went mad from knowing too much, seeing too much, carrying too many secrets. Pause. Because I loved you, and love means hoping your children escape the family curse. It's not a curse, babushka. It's a job. A good job. With benefits. Her grandmother laughed. It was bitter and fond. You sound like my mother. He said the same thing. Called it diplomatic service to alternative communities. Very official. Very Soviet. She negotiated the Moscow Treaty of 1952, kept the vampire clans from going to war over Stalin's death. Saved thousands of lives, human and otherwise. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to know. After she died, I left that world. Met your grandfather, normal man, accountant, very boring, very safe. I thought I'd broken the cycle. Had a normal daughter, normal life. Then you were born and you started speaking in full sentences at 18 months. 6 languages by the time you were 7. That tongue, Katya. That gift. You have it stronger than anyone in 3 generations. Katya sat on her Murphy bed, phone pressed to her ear, reality reorganizing itself again. The protection you put in our blood. My mother's doing. Old magic. Expensive magic. She traded 20 years of her life to a witch in Kiev to bind it into our family line. Protection against compulsion, against certain mind magics, against being turned without consent. Her grandmother's voice went soft. She didn't want us to be victims. So she made us expensive to victimize. 20 years of her life? Magic requires payment. Always. She chose to pay with time rather than let her daughters pay with freedom. A long exhale. Listen to me carefully, Katya Sergeyevna. You've signed with them, yes? Yes. Then you're family now. They're family. They'll protect you, but you must be clever. Never show all your cards. Never stop being useful. And never fall in love with them. Babushka. I'm serious. They live forever. You don't. Love with them is arithmetic that doesn't balance. My mother loved a vampire once. 50 years she served him. He cried at her funeral, real tears, real grief. Then went home to his life that stretched on forever while she was just a footnote. A fondly remembered employee. Katya thought about Dmitri talking about Oksana. The careful way he said her name. 70 years of service ending in a funeral. Did she regret it? Katya asked quietly. Every day. Not at all. That's the problem with loving immortals. It's everything while you're living it and nothing after you're gone. They move on because they have to. Eternity doesn't stop for grief. Her grandmother's voice was fierce now. So be smart. Be useful. Be respected. But guard your heart like it's state secrets because it is. I will, babushka. And Katya, call your mother. Tell her you got a promotion. She's been worried. A promotion to what? Supernatural diplomat isn't exactly a LinkedIn title. Tell her international consulting. It's vague enough to be true. Your mother doesn't need to know about vampires. She has enough anxiety about you living in America. The vampires would put her over the edge. They talked for another 20 minutes. About Moscow. About Katya's cousin's wedding. About the price of bread and the eternal disappointment of Russian politics. Normal things. Acre things. Reminders that she still had a life that existed outside conference rooms full of predators. When she finally hung up, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. Pink light bleeding into gray. Somewhere in the city, vampires were going to ground. Werewolves were heading home from night shifts. Witches were probably doing whatever witches did at dawn. Yoga maybe, or summoning demons for breakfast. Katia showered. Made coffee that tasted like cardboard compared to whatever Thomas had served her. Dressed in comfortable clothes. Jeans, a blouse, boots that could handle walking. The company phone Nadia had given her buzzed at 7:30. On my way. Dimitri says to bring appetite. We're starting with food tour of supernatural Manhattan. Nadia. Another text followed immediately. Also bring open mind. Some of the food is weird. At exactly 8 a.m. the Mercedes pulled up. Nadia was wearing jeans and a leather jacket, looking less like a driver and more like someone who could handle trouble with efficiency and possibly excessive force. Morning, she said as Katia slid in. Sleep well. Didn't sleep. Called my grandmother. Discovered my family has been working for supernaturals for generations and no one thought to mention it. This surprise magical heritage conversation. Always fun. Nadia pulled into traffic. How'd you take it? I'm either having a very elaborate breakdown or I've inherited a family business that involves vampires. Jury's still out. Embrace the ambiguity. It's good for the soul. She handed Katia a coffee. Real coffee. From a place in Brooklyn run by a hedge witch. Best coffee in the city. She uses minor luck charms in the brewing process. Technically illegal, but the Supernatural Council looks the other way because the coffee is genuinely excellent. Katia sipped. It was the best coffee she'd ever tasted. There are laws about charmed coffee? There are laws about everything. Edmund has a whole library devoted to supernatural legal code. 17,000 years of accumulated regulations, precedents and strongly worded letters. He once spent 3 months arguing about the legal definition of lycanthropic transformation versus temporary species adjustment. The werewolves almost rioted. They drove south into a part of Manhattan Katia didn't recognize. The streets looked normal. Brownstones, shops, people heading to work. But something was different. The light bent strangely. Shadows pooled in corners where they shouldn't. And the people. A woman walked past with eyes that were entirely black. A man on the corner had skin that seemed to shimmer between textures. A child chasing a ball that floated just slightly off the ground. Welcome to the crossroads, Nadia said. Where supernatural Manhattan overlaps with human Manhattan. Same physical space, different perceptual layer. Humans can walk through here and see nothing unusual. Their brains edit out the impossible. But you, she tapped Katia's temple. You can see it now. Contract makes you part of the community. Changes how you perceive reality. I can just see it. Just like that. The protection in your blood helps. Makes you resistant to the standard, look away, charms most places use. Plus, Dimitri probably had Morgana do something to your contract. She likes adding little extras. Last translator could suddenly taste lies. Very useful, very annoying at restaurants. They parked in front of a diner that looked aggressively normal. Chrome and vinyl and a neon sign that said Helga's. Except the sign flickered between languages. English, Russian, something that might have been Sumerian. Inside, the breakfast crowd was diverse in ways that defied biology. A table of vampires nursed coffee and tried not to look hungry. Werewolves occupied the back corner, arguing loudly about sports in voices that occasionally slipped into growls. A witch sat at the counter, reading a newspaper that was definitely screaming. Literally screaming. Tiny voices emerging from the headlines. Dimitri was in a booth by the window. He'd traded his suit for jeans and a black sweater that made him look less like a corporate vampire king and more like someone who might teach philosophy or commit very elegant murders. He waved them over. You look terrible, he said cheerfully as Katia slid into the booth. Didn't sleep. Spent the night learning my grandmother has been keeping secrets for 70 years. The Morozova line. I should have recognized the name. Your great-grandmother negotiated the Moscow Treaty. Brilliant woman. Terrifying woman. Once threatened to curse Stalin if he interfered with supernatural territories. He listened. She threatened Stalin? Stalin was scared of witches. Very superstitious. Your great-grandmother wasn't even a witch. just very convincing and very willing to imply she had connections. He smiled. It runs in the family apparently. That willingness to threaten powerful men. A waitress appeared. 7 feet tall with skin that looked like tree bark and eyes that were definitely not human. What'll it be? 3 specials, Dimitri said. And coffee. Lots of coffee. You got it, boss. She lumbered away, moving with the particular grace of something that was used to being much larger. Dryad, Nadia explained. From Central Park. She works here part-time. Makes excellent pancakes. Why is a dryad from Central Park working at a diner? Student loans, Dimitri said dryly. Even supernatural creatures aren't immune to predatory lending practices. She's putting herself through botany school. Very dedicated. Excellent employee. The food arrived impossibly fast. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, all normal looking. But the pancakes tasted like sunshine and forest floor. The eggs were too perfect, like the platonic ideal of eggs. The bacon was probably normal, but after everything else, Katya didn't trust it. This is amazing, she said through a mouthful. Helga's is an institution. Been here since 1823. Helga herself is a dwarf. The actual Norse kind, not the medical condition. 4 feet tall, voice like gravel, temper like a natural disaster. She runs the best supernatural diner on the East Coast. Dimitri ate his eggs with the careful attention of someone who remembered when food was scarce. You'll be eating here often. It's neutral territory. Good place for negotiations. Hard to declare war over really excellent pancakes. Has anyone tried? Twice. Helga banned them both for a decade. They came back apologetic and hungry. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Around them, the diner hummed with conversations in a dozen languages, several of which weren't human. Katya caught fragments, arguing about territory, discussing stock portfolios, complaining about the weather. Normal things said by very abnormal people. Ready? Dimitri asked, finishing his coffee. For what? Your education. We're going to walk you through the crossroads. Introduce you to the community. Show you the places that matter. He stood, leaving money on the table. Cash, old bills, the kind collectors would pay fortunes for. By the end of today, you'll know which shops are werewolf-friendly, which bars are vampire territory, and which bakeries accidentally summon minor demons in their sourdough starters. That's a real thing? Unfortunately. The bakery on 3rd Avenue has a demon problem every other Tuesday. They make excellent croissants though. Worth the risk. The Crossroads district of Manhattan existed in the spaces between human perception. Same streets, same buildings, but layered with supernatural reality like a double-exposed photograph. Dimitri led Katya through it with the easy confidence of someone who'd navigated these spaces for centuries. Rules, he said as they walked. First, never accept food from the Fae. They don't have a presence here officially, but occasionally they wander through and they love making deals. Food from them means debt. Debt to them means your firstborn or your name or 70 years of service doing things you really don't want to do. Noted. No Fae food. Second, werewolves are territorial but reasonable. If you're in their space, acknowledge them. Not. Make eye contact. Not staring, that's a challenge. Just recognition. They value respect over submission. A group of large men rounded the corner. Their eyes flashed gold in the morning light. One of them nodded at Dimitri. A gesture of equals. Dimitri nodded back. Third, witches are complicated. Some are friendly. Some hold grudges from before your grandmother was born. If a shop has protection sigils on the door, he pointed to a bookstore whose entrance was covered in symbols. Ask permission before entering. It's polite, and politeness keeps you from being turned into small fauna. Small fauna. Mice mostly. Sometimes rabbits. One witch in Queens has a thing for newts, but she's considered eccentric even by witch standards. They passed a grocery store that sold normal items. Apples, bread, milk. Alongside things that definitely weren't normal. Bottled moonlight. Jars labeled memories, bittersweet. A freezer section that advertised frozen hopes and crystallized dreams. Don't shop there unsupervised, Nadia advised. Prices are weird. Sometimes money, sometimes favors, sometimes years of your life. Read the tags carefully. A vampire stood outside a nightclub despite the daylight. He was young, maybe 25 in appearance, with the kind of style that suggested he'd died sometime in the 1980s and committed to the aesthetic. He waved at Dmitri. Boss. Heard you hired a new translator. This her. Raphael, this is Katya Morozova. Katya. Raphael runs Crimson. Best nightclub in supernatural Manhattan. Excellent music, terrible crowd control. The crowd controls itself, Raphael protested. Mostly. There was that one incident with the werewolf bachelor party, but we've implemented new policies since then. What happened? Katya asked. Full moon. Open bar. Inadequate supervision. Raphael shrugged. We had to replace 3 walls and apologize to the witch coven upstairs. But we learned valuable lessons about party planning and structural reinforcement. They moved on. Every block revealed new layers. A library that was somehow larger on the inside than outside. A tattoo parlor where the tattoos occasionally moved. A flower shop run by a woman with green skin and flowers literally growing from her hair. That's Iris, Dmitri said. Dryad, obviously. She does excellent arrangements for supernatural weddings. Also funerals. She's very versatile. Do vampires get married? Sometimes. Usually for tax purposes or immigration fraud, but occasionally for love. We're romantic in our own deeply dysfunctional way. He stopped in front of a building that looked abandoned. Crumbling brick. Boarded windows. But the door was pristine and the handle was silver-worked with intricate patterns. This is important. This is the archive. Archive of what? Everything. Every treaty, every agreement, every contract signed between supernatural entities in the last 3,000 years. It's maintained by the archivists. Neutral party, no allegiance to any species. They just record. Document. Preserve. He pushed open the door. You'll need access. Your work will require historical research. Inside, the archive was impossible. Shelves stretched up forever, disappearing into darkness that might have been ceiling or might have been infinity. Ladders that moved on their own. Books that whispered. Scrolls that glowed faintly with their own light. And the smell, old paper, older ink, the scent of preserved time. An elderly man appeared from the stacks. Human-looking, but his eyes were ancient. Older than anything Katya had seen. He wore a cardigan with elbow patches and spectacles that looked like they'd witnessed the invention of writing. Dmitri Volkov, he said, voice like dry leaves. I heard you'd found a new translator. Morozova line. Great-granddaughter of Anya Morozova. The man's eyes lit up. Anya. Brilliant woman. She translated the Moscow Treaty in 3 languages simultaneously while negotiating hostage release and drinking vodka. I've never seen anything like it. He extended a hand to Katya. I'm Sebastian. Chief Archivist. Your great-grandmother saved my life once. 1952. Stalin's purges extended to supernaturals that year. Very messy, very political. She hid me in a safe house for 6 months. I didn't know, Katya said, taking his hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. She wouldn't have told anyone. That was Anya's way. Quiet heroism. Loud curses. He smiled. Come. I'll show you your great-grandmother's section. He led them deep into the stacks. The shelves here were organized by family name, by bloodline. Morozova was carved into the wood, and beneath it, files. Documents. Photographs. Sebastian pulled out a leather-bound book. Anya's personal records. She kept notes on every negotiation. Linguistic strategies, cultural observations, who could be trusted and who needed watching. He handed it to Katya. It's yours now. Family inheritance. Katya opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, old-style Cyrillic. Notes in the margins in multiple languages. Sketches of symbols. A photograph tucked in the front. A woman in her 40s, severe expression, eyes that looked like Katya's own. She looks angry, Katya whispered. She was angry. Constantly. Productively. Sebastian's smile was fond. She channeled rage into precision. Made anger into art. That's the Morozova gift, turning fury into language that cuts clean. He looked at Katya carefully. You have it too. I can see it. That same fire. Dmitri was watching her. Something in his expression, recognition maybe, memory. Oksana had it too. That controlled burn. That refusal to let anger make you sloppy. Did you love her? Katya asked. The question surprised her as much as him. Dmitri was silent for a long moment. Around them the archive breathed. Books whispered. Time moved strangely. Finally, yes. Not romantically, she wouldn't have tolerated that, and I wasn't what she needed. But I loved her the way you love someone who makes you better by refusing to let you be worse. She was my conscience. My mirror. The voice that said, "You're being an aristocratic prick," when I needed to hear it. Your grandmother warned you, Nadia said quietly to Katya. About loving them. About the arithmetic that doesn't balance. Katya looked at Dmitri. At centuries in his eyes. At the careful way he held himself, like someone who'd learned that everything he loved would eventually end. She did. She said love with immortals is everything while you're living it and nothing after you're gone. Your grandmother was wise, Dmitri said. And not entirely wrong. But she missed something important. He touched the leather journal in Katya's hands. Oksana has been dead for centuries. I have loved and lost a dozen people since then. Watched friends age and die, watched whole civilizations rise and fall. And yet, his voice was fierce now. She's still here. And how I think. In standards I hold myself to. In the fact that I hire translators who curse at me because she taught me that good advice comes from people unafraid to tell you the truth. That's not nothing, Sebastian said softly. That's legacy. That's immortality of a different kind. It's also, Dmitri continued, meeting Katya's eyes, a long time to carry someone's absence. Your grandmother was right about that. Love with us is complicated arithmetic. We don't forget, but we can't stop living. That's the curse of eternity. Everything matters and nothing lasts. The archive was very quiet. Even the whispering books had gone silent. So what do I do? Katya asked. Knowing this. Knowing that you'll outlive me, that anything I build here will be temporary for you. You do the work anyway, Dmitri said simply. You translate. You negotiate. You prevent wars and save lives and make sure that treaties written in blood are also written with precision. You do it because it matters, not because it lasts forever. He smiled, tired and genuine. And if you're very lucky and very unlucky, you leave an impression deep enough that someone remembers you centuries after you're gone. Carries your voice in their head. Makes decisions based on what you would have said. Is that enough? Katya whispered. It has to be. For mortals working with immortals, it's all there is. Sebastian cleared his throat. Heavy conversation for a Tuesday morning. Perhaps we should move on to the practical aspects of archive access? Katya will need her own credentials. They spent the next hour setting up her access. Biometric scans that recorded things she didn't have names for. Passwords in languages she'd need to learn. A key that was warm to the touch and seemed to hum with potential energy. The archive is neutral ground, Sebastian explained. No violence. No coercion. No magic except preservation spells. Break those rules and you're banned for a century. We've only banned 3 people in 3,000 years. We take our neutrality seriously. When they finally emerged back into daylight, Katya felt like she'd been underwater. Coming up for air. Reality reasserting itself. Lunch. Dmitri suggested. There's an excellent Thai place run by a family of Nagas. Very authentic. Occasionally the curry is too spicy because they forget human tolerances, but the pad Thai is perfect. Nagas. Katya repeated. Snake spirits. Southeast Asian. Very polite, very business-oriented, excellent cooks. He started walking. You'll learn. Every species has their strengths. Vampires are good at long-term planning and looking dramatic. Werewolves excel at loyalty and physical tasks. Witches are versatile but temperamental. Nagas are excellent at hospitality and remembering grudges. It's anthropology but with fangs. They ate lunch at a restaurant that smelled like lemongrass and magic. The owner was a woman whose eyes were slit-pupilled and whose movements were too fluid. She greeted Dmitri like an old friend, which he probably was, and studied Katya with interest. New translator? Good. The last one was competent but lacked personality. You, she pointed at Katya. You have fire. I can smell it. It's good. Translators need fire. Otherwise the vampires walk all over you. I'm right here, Prim, Dmitri said. I know. I'm being rude on purpose. It's good for your humility. She swept away to get their order. By the time they finished eating, the sun was setting. Katia had walked through supernatural Manhattan, met creatures from mythology, accessed an archive that defied physics, and learned that her great-grandmother had threatened Stalin while drunk. It was the best-worst day of her life. "Tomorrow," Dmitri said as Nadia pulled up with the Mercedes, "we start actual work. The Manhattan, New Jersey Treaty. 300 pages of territorial disputes and grammatical warfare. Edmund will supervise. Try not to let him bore you to death with comma placement. I'll do my best." "And Katia?" He caught her arm gently. His hand was cool, not quite alive. "Thank you for asking about Oksana. For understanding that loving mortals is the best thing immortals can do. For being here despite knowing how it ends." "How does it end?" she asked. He smiled. "Sad and real. With you doing work that matters. With me being a better king because you told me uncomfortable truths. With your name in the archive next to your great-grandmother's, and someone centuries from now reading your notes and learning from your precision. That's not an ending. That's a legacy. Sometimes they're the same thing." He got in the car. Watched him disappear into the Manhattan evening. A vampire king heading home to his eternal life, carrying the memory of everyone who'd made him better by being temporary. Nadia caught her eye in the mirror. "You okay?" "I signed up to translate documents. Nobody mentioned existential philosophy about mortality and meaning. That's supernatural work. Everything's philosophical when you're negotiating with people who've outlived empires." He grinned. "But hey, the pay is excellent and the dental is amazing. Focus on that." When Katia got home, she opened her great-grandmother's journal. Found an entry from 1952, written after the Moscow Treaty. "Dmitri asked me today if I feared death. I told him I feared wasting life more. That's the difference between us. He has infinity and treats it carelessly. I have decades and guard them fiercely. Perhaps that's what mortals offer immortals. The reminder that time is precious because it ends." He didn't understand. But someday he will. When I'm gone and he's still here carrying forward the work we built together. That's legacy. That's how mortals defeat death. We leave impressions deep enough to outlast our bodies. Katia closed the journal. Tomorrow she'd translate treaties. Navigate supernatural politics. Prevent wars over comma placement. But tonight she understood something her grandmother and great-grandmother had known. Some work mattered not because it lasted forever, but because it changed forever while it lasted. She texted Dmitri, "Ready for tomorrow. Try not to be an aristocratic prick about comma usage." His response came immediately, "No promises. But I'll try." Oksana would have insisted on it. Somewhere in the archive, Sebastian was probably recording this moment. Another Morozova. Another chapter. Another mortal choosing to leave her mark on immortal history through precision, fire, and the kind of curses that cut clean. Outside her window, supernatural Manhattan hummed with life that was older than countries and stranger than dreams. And Katia Morozova, translator, heir to a legacy of linguistic violence, and the newest voice in a centuries-old conversation, was exactly where she belonged. In the spaces between worlds, speaking truth to power, making sure that when immortals made promises, mortals made sure they kept them. It wasn't the American dream her grandmother had warned her about. It was better. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. We're sure you enjoyed it. We have many more captivating and beautiful stories ready for you. Click on the image on your screen to watch the next one, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with our latest content.